welcome to Madrid. Welcome to the NEWSOCRACY conference. I'm Nora from the European Center for Press and Media Freedom. I will kind of guide you through the day and announce a few things. Before we start, if you don't understand what I'm saying right now, please, there is a simultaneous translation and you need to get an earphone like this. It's outside, so please, if you don't speak either Spanish or English, so also people who don't understand Spanish, please go out and get one of these technical equipment. So, also if you want to do social media, tweeting and so on, you see the Wi-Fi password and Wi-Fi here. It's also in your program, in the little A5 folder. You find it. We have some hashtags here. So this is all practical information for the start. And now I'm really happy to give the word to Victoria Anderica from the City Council of Madrid. And she will be our first welcome speaker.
Thanks. Hello, good morning. Can you hear me? Yes? Good morning, buenos días a todos. Welcome to Madrid. It's a pleasure to have you all here today. It's really great to be able to host these kinds of event here in the city of Madrid because we're really trying in this government to foster these kinds of initiatives that will have an impact definitely in the development of freedom of the press here in Spain. I'm going to do a little introduction in Spanish, very short. Bueno, como decía, buenos días, muchísimas gracias a todos.
As I was saying, a very good warm welcome to all of you. My name is Victoria Anderica. I work in open government and transparency from Madrid City Council, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all here today. I want to thank the APLI, the PDLI and the ECPMF, which is not so easy to pronounce, for having chosen the city of Madrid for this event, which is of great interest to all concerned. For Madrid City, it's extremely important to organise such events because we feel that it's necessary to do as much as possible to strengthen the media so that the citizenry can trust the media. It's not just a matter of public initiatives, and from my point of view, it's certainly not to a large extent, since here there are many obligations that all media should have with respect to inherent transparency. This is something that's going to be discussed today. It's also very interesting for that to be developed. What institutions and the City Council of Madrid have to do, of course, is to exploit this route towards transparency, which we've tried to do since coming to power. How can we manage it and how do we publish our institutional messages at Madrid City Council? If the institutional publicity law in Spain did not have, although not as extensive and detailed as it should be, what the City Council has done is generate its own obligation to publish everything from institutional notifications, how we invest money in institutional advertising and publicity in different media. We want to extend that concept of institutional publicity, which include other platforms. Often there's an investment in other types of campaign and social networks that are not included. So, just speaking from the point of view of public institutions, there are perhaps not a lot of margin, particularly at municipal level, as to what we can do. There's always more than we think. We can enhance the legislation so as not to prevent the improvement, to do more than the law requires, and that's something we want to do in open formats, to be able to provide comparative information about how we are investing our resources for institutional advertising. So once more, let me repeat my welcome to you all and thank you for coming, and I hope that you have a very successful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Victoria. My name is Lutz Kinkel. I'm the Managing Director of the ECPMF, of the European Center for Press and Media Freedom, and I cordially welcome you to this NEWSOCRACY conference. This is the place to discuss a really serious phenomenon that affects not only the freedom of speech, but maybe also democracy itself. It is about the concentration of media ownership in the hands of a very few. As the Media Pluralism Monitor proves, in 2/3 of the European countries, less than 4 owners hold 80% of the media. This is a lot of numbers in one sentence, so I repeat it. In 2/3 of the European countries, less than 4 owners hold 80% of the media. This sounds alarming, this is alarming, but probably not in each and every case. Just one example, I just had been with EFJ on a fact-finding mission to the Baltics, and we went to Estonia. And in Estonia, the market is practically split up in between 2 larger media groups. And within these media groups, or in the middle of these media groups, the public broadcaster is operating. All of them produce, not only, but to a fair amount, quality journalism. So you have 3 players on the market, and you have a population of 1.3 million, which is practically some districts of Berlin, where I come from. And you have a complete free access to the internet. So can we say there is a big problem? Maybe not. There are minor problems, of course, to discuss, but there is not really a big problem. Totally different situation, for example, in Bulgaria. Bulgaria, for the time being, holds the presidency of the Council of the European Union, as you all know. And in Bulgaria, one oligarch is controlling 80% of the media market. One oligarch, 80% of the media market. And the majority of the media outlets are openly favoring the policy of the government, and they produce partly smear campaigns against critical journalists. We had just a debate on the situation in Bulgaria in Brussels, and it was really a heated debate with journalists from all fractions of this Bulgarian market. And it turned out that the allies of this oligarch, that they deny his power. They claim he only possesses a very few newspapers. This is true when it comes to official records, and this is very, very untrue when it comes to the political and economic influence of this oligarch. So first of all, what we need in Europe is really valid public data about media ownership. This is a necessary X-ray of the market. Readers need this information to develop an assessment of the products of media outlets. And the governments need this information to preserve media pluralism and diversity. I'm really very happy that we can discuss this topic now on a truly pan-European level. We have speakers and moderators and even hackers from Spain, Italy, Netherlands, UK, also from Bulgaria. So this is really a European conference. I have to thank the 2 main organizers of this event. First of all, it's the staff of ECPMF, and no, first of all, it's the staff of PDLI. I'm very sorry. And well, I really have to say thank you to Yolanda Quintana. Where is she? She's sitting where? Over there. Thank you very much, Yolanda. Also the staff from PDLI, and I really also have to say thank you to the staff of ECPMF. They are creating, well, all these wonderful logos and simply everything, and in special well to Nora Wiechowsitz, sitting over here and organizing the whole event. Thank you. So if you have any questions about the conference, don't hesitate to approach them. I promise they know everything. I only know very little. And I also have to thank the European Union. And we have here Susanne van der Zande representing the European Commission. They supported this conference financially. And I can tell you, without the support of the European Commission, the media freedom in Europe would be weaker than it already is. I wish us a fruitful debate. Thank you.
Bueno, buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Virginia Perez Alonso, the president of the PDLI, the Platform for the Defense of the Freedom of Information Defense Platform. I want to thank all of you for coming, and my thanks to the European Centre for Press and Media Freedom, the ECPMF, for having organized this jointly with our organization, and also to the Trans-European, Balkan and Caucasian Observatory for participating too. And some of you will know, but some of you may not. The PDLI platform has been leading the accusations against attacks on press freedom for many years now. When we started, we realized what was going to happen. We see that legislation was being enacted to clamp down on the press, to gag the press, and we've become a leading proponent of this battle to defend media freedom. With political actions, we meet with political parties to try to drive legislative reforms to ensure the freedom of information. We also have training seminars and dissemination activities such as our manual against these legal gags, and we also have technical papers establishing our credentials. We have legal basis for our arguments, and we like to analyze international standards in terms of the right to information. We also organize campaigns with different groups and coordinate our activities with both international and national bodies, from Amnesty International to the International Press Institute, or We Are Not a Crime campaigns, etc. And there are also matters that focus on dialogue in the social media, with bloggers and fake news and so on, and the need to protect whistleblowers. In Spain, at least, there's still a lot of work to do to improve that. Recently, we were awarded the 2017 prize for the defense of press freedom from the Valencian Reporters Institute, but we still need to move forward. This is a democracy, and we have to help democracy advance and improve. So we resort to the ombudsman time and time again to ensure that there is proper freedom of information, and as we're constantly challenging the fines on journalists, we've managed to achieve our first success for media against these fines. So there are many, many cases of breaches of the freedom of expression, and the most important thing that we've done is establish tools so that everyone can share with us the visibility of these attacks. Our most recent action has been to create an observatory of the aggressions against female journalists. We've got gag laws in place, and we're obviously interested in discussing these and many other issues, such as right to honour, the legislation on transparency, or crimes of opinion, and so on. But that's why we're all here today, and that's why we're organising this event, because we feel this is crucial. As Dr. Lutz said in the opening, Lutz Kinkel in his opening remarks, we have to be able to have access to information about who owns the media. It's so difficult to find out that we've had to make a great deal of effort to try to get the information for the press release we distributed yesterday. You can see that 2 out of 3 countries have 80% of ownership in hands of a few. This is not something that was easy to find out. We've had to dig around to be able to publish it, and finally we've been able to do so. So this right to information should include the right to access this specific information. Who is behind? Who holds the ownership of the media? And at the end of the day, what are the economic and political activities of the owners of the media? This is the only way in which the citizens and the readers and viewers of the media can understand what they're reading and why they're reading it. And that's something that's going to be discussed in the course of today's event, which I hope that you all enjoy very much. Thank you all very much indeed.
Is unfortunately not here in person. Dr. Joan Barata, he is an international expert on freedom of expression, media freedom and media regulation. He has been an advisor to the OSCE representative on freedom of the media, as well as Secretary General of the Catalonia Audiovisual Council. And he is based in Vienna, and he sent us a video keynote. We're going to listen now.
Hola, buenos días a todos. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would need to apologize for not being there. I had other commitments, so unfortunately, the only possibility for me to make this initial remarks is using this platform, this screen, which is of course not the best option, but I'm happy that I still have the possibility to speak a bit, to participate a bit in this important event now taking place in Madrid. We'll be discussing about media pluralism and of course the very close and important link between media pluralism and democracy. That this is something that is well known, but I think that needs to be stressed again and again. Media pluralism, freedom of expression are basic preconditions for the exercise of the most important human rights, and of course they are basic preconditions for having an effective, functioning and quality democratic system. So again, I know that this is something that will be repeated, but we need to underscore it again and again so that everybody is quite aware of that and states take the adequate measures to protect every time media pluralism. Of course, the main question, or the first important question here is what is media pluralism? And how we define media pluralism, how we assess media pluralism within a certain context, and how we, let's say, achieve an acceptable level of media pluralism. And this is a matter that is particularly controversial. We know that at the level of many research centers, some of them are present and represented today in Madrid, there has been an effort in order to build tools, parameters, criteria, indicators. But this is still a very challenging matter. And I also need to stress that, for example, at the level of the European Union, the EU Directive on Audiovisual Media Services has provisions in many areas, including protection of minors, the definition of audiovisual services, video on demand, regulation of advertising, etc., etc. But it's still very difficult to achieve at the European Union level a common regulation with regards to the protection of media pluralism, as it is this area, it's still in the hands of the states, and we see very different regulations depending on the state. So, as you see, this means that this is a matter that is particularly sensitive, particularly complex, and which still needs to continue being discussed. I don't have, of course, the time to address this matter or to answer to these questions in a proper manner. For that, of course, I would need far more than 10 minutes. But I would just like to outline a few elements that I think that are relevant in this discussion, and I'm sure that these elements, these matters will be discussed in the course of the day. First of all, something that is quite known, but I think that it also needs to be underscored once again, is the fact that media pluralism is not only about market competition. Of course, having a free market in the area of media is probably a good thing, but having a free market, having, let's say, competition among media outlets doesn't guarantee by itself media pluralism. Media pluralism goes beyond protection of consumers, goes beyond free competition. It's about protecting citizens and enabling citizens to participate in democratic society. So it is not enough. It's something that, of course, has importance, but we cannot equal media pluralism with market competition. The second thing, which is already in the European directive, but is something that in many countries, including Spain, we still need to work on, is to improve media transparency or ownership transparency. Transparency has become a very, very important principle. And of course, nowadays, it's not only applicable to ownership, but it can also be applicable to other matters when it comes to the, let's say, new digital services. We know that transparency is also a very important component of net neutrality, and perhaps when it comes to the use of algorithms, well, maybe we cannot now avoid algorithms being used, but perhaps requiring transparency would be the first step to better control the use of algorithms by certain platforms. The third element is the fact that, of course, nowadays, licensing processes are now, in a way, disappearing because nowadays, with the internet and new services, licensing processes like they existed in the past for traditional media tend to disappear, but still, there are some areas where, for example, in digital terrestrial television, where licensing is still important and is still a requirement in order to have access to the public sphere. And I think that licensing procedures is an area that still some improvement needs to be made, because in many countries, licensing procedures are still used as mechanisms in order to control media outlets. Another element that I also would like to outline here, of course, is public service broadcasting. This is a very important policy element in order to promote media pluralism within a certain environment, and we still see in many European countries serious problems with regards to public service broadcasters. Problems in terms of economic sustainability, problems in terms of political independence, etc., etc. And I think that in Spain we have seen many of these issues. So I think that we still need to stress on a proper reform, on having proper public service broadcasters in place as a key component of media pluralism. And another very important institutional factor here is having in place a proper independent authority to regulate the media sector. Because as we know, apart from the rules that may regulate media pluralism and may try to protect media pluralism, we also need to have proper institutions to enforce these rules. And in many countries, we still see that regulators are not properly prepared to enforce certain rules that can be complex, that media regulators are still not sufficiently independent in order to apply rules. So having a proper institutional system where the government doesn't interfere in an improper manner in the regulation, in the protection of media pluralism is also of utmost importance. And here, the last remark that I would like to make is that here, of course, if we want to have a complete discussion about media pluralism, it's not enough with referring only to traditional media, to traditional broadcasters, to establishing limits to ownership. It's something far more complicated nowadays. case, because now we have platforms, we have social media, we even have device manufacturers who take decisions that have a very direct impact on the kind of content, on the kind of services we have access to. So we need to open this idea and open the regulation of media pluralism to new actors, to new factors that now are of particular importance when it comes to the protection of media pluralism. As I said, it's not only now about restricting the ownership in traditional media, it's also about being aware of the power of platforms, of the ways platforms, private actors can interfere in pluralism, can interfere in the dissemination of ideas, and therefore find the most adequate regulatory instruments, which of course are proportionate, adequate, they don't interfere in an improper manner in media freedom, but at the same time, they can also address problems that now we have started to see in many countries, particularly when it comes to the influence of certain new media in election processes, for example. So, as you see, there are many, many issues here that I think are all relevant in this discussion, and I can only hope that this will be addressed today in the course of your discussions, of your seminar. I really hope, I was there, but unfortunately this is not possible. I hope to see you soon, next time, somewhere else, and I wish you all the best. Thank you. Hasta pronto.
So I'm sorry for the not so good quality. I hope you understood the main message, and I can relieve you, the second keynote speaker is here in person, and I would like to welcome Mr. Ángel Garcia Castillejo. He is a doctor in law and doctor in information science from the Complutense University of Madrid. He has a law degree, and he is a professor of journalism and audiovisual communication at the Carlos University of Madrid. And he was a researcher for the CMPF Media Pluralism Monitor in 2016, right, Angel? It was 2016, and he's going to speak about media ownership concentration now in Europe and Spain. Thank you very much.
Good morning.
All right, so contrary to him, I will address you in Spanish. Well, following what my friends from the platform and from the center have told me, today I will be giving you a short presentation between 10 to 15 minutes in length to tell you about the work that we have conducted for the last 1.5 years from our working group. It's a working group where we were asked to carry out the media pluralism monitor for some countries, including Spain. So I will briefly would like to share with you the main outcomes of that media pluralism monitor. At the end of my presentation, I will be giving you the hyperlinks so that you can consult it online. So we will have the participation of 20+2 European countries, including Croatia and Turkey. And very briefly, as I say, I will share with you the outcomes of the findings of the study, and I would also refer to the Spanish outcomes more in particular. I guess that you are aware of these reports. Okay, Media Pluralism Monitor. Those of you who are not aware of it, I will invite you to get to know it, and hopefully will become a reference for you. This is an initiative launched by the European Commission following advice from the European Council, to protect freedom of expression, freedom of information, and also to study the risks threatening that. So this is a European Union institutions' effort from a position of independence, and it has been carried out by several groups of of academia, research centers. These analyses are carried out annually, and the same parameters are used for in all the countries. So I'd like to tell you beforehand, before we move on, to take a look at the outcomes. So despite the effort made to harmonize data by using a single matrix, I have a feeling, I feel, and surely some of you will agree with me, that depending on who makes national reports, we are not equally demanding for our countries. I'm saying this because you will be surprised that some outcomes from North European countries or from other countries of the European Union that may take you to think that they are better in terms of pluralism, transparency, and anti-concentration measures, both vertical and horizontal, cross-concentration, that could take us to think that the situation is much better off in Northern European countries. However, data or real-life data tell us that this situation is not like that. So as I was saying, in 2016, these reports was produced not only for the 28 countries of the European Union, but also for 2 candidate European countries, Croatia and Turkey. And the main conclusion that you should refer to is that no country is free from risks. All countries face risks when it comes to the effective enforcement or application of rights of information and freedom of expression. So the level of risk is a medium level of risk, but in any case we see a risk of ownership concentration in media. In the case of Spain, report has it that this risk is a medium level risk. So regarding levels of concentration and pluralism, country by country, the European Union as a whole, and including the 2 candidate countries. So regarding media pluralism, I tell you about color code. So a lower risk is represented in green, medium risk in yellow, high risk in red. So situation in general regarding media pluralism would tell us that in case of France, Portugal, Italy, risk is low, but in the rest of European Union countries, level of risk is medium in terms of effective pluralism. So regarding transparency of media ownership, situation in general, it's slightly better. So we see high risk in terms of transparency of media ownership in the Czech Republic and Greece, and whereas in other countries such as the UK, Italy, and others, we see that the situation, the level of risks there is medium. So this is a situation, I think, that here subjectivity of the groups and having the members of the working groups being nationals of the countries for which they are producing a report, this explains perhaps this lack of harmony in the results. If we compare our case of Spain with the UK or Ireland, we can see a gap which makes me be surprised in terms of transparency. especially in the UK case, where we know that lots of significant work, significant effort has been made for this for transparency in ownership of media. So regarding horizontal concentration of ownership of media, so no country is at low risk. We find medium level of risk in France, Germany, Italy, Spain and Greece. And Italy, however, we see high level of risk horizontally in Portugal, Ireland, Belgium and the Netherlands, as well as Northern European countries. Probably this high risk comes from a higher demand in these countries, and also, well, perhaps this would explain perception of higher risk in terms of concentration of media ownership. So regarding commercial sector and owners of editorial content, so we see medium level of risk in Spain, Germany, Belgium, Italy and Greece, low risk in France, Portugal and Belgium and the Netherlands, and then we see high risk in the UK, Nordic countries, Scandinavian countries, Poland, Czech Republic, etc. So regarding viability of media in general, we find low risk in most of the countries and medium level of risk in UK, the Netherlands, Italy, Czech Republic and Poland. And this is of most concern to us. So the cross ownership of media, or high concentration of cross media ownership and application of competition. So low risk in Germany, Italy, Portugal. However, in countries such as Spain, we see that this risk is very, very high. And not only because of the cross concentration of media ownership or cross media ownership, but because of what we have seen about the impact on advertising markets, and more specifically in the field of TV, where we see a duopoly in terms of TV advertising and main income generator of for Spanish TV. In Spanish case, outcomes of this Media Pluralism Monitor 2016 points at a medium risk situation for media in Spain. Here I'd like to make a reflection. Since the arrival of democracy in Spain, or the comeback to democracy in Spain in 1978 up until to date, we must admit that significant efforts have been made to develop a legal framework safeguarding pluralism of media. So these legal efforts have not been necessarily accompanied or translated into our market reality. So therefore we see a divorce between the legal framework aimed at safeguarding pluralism for our democratic system. However, the reality does not match that legal framework. So therefore, this shows up, we see a divorce here. So out of all the 4 areas analyzed in the media pluralism monitor, in the political independence, market pluralism, social inclusion, and basic protection, here we have to say that in some cases high risk has been perceived, and it is worrisome that in some other countries the level of risk is medium, but also we see that political independence indicator is the one that is found to be at a higher risk, standing at 54%. In the field of political independence, which is perhaps the most worrying, and here I would like to make a brief reflection, I'd like to say that this is the indicator that is of top concern for the case of the Spanish markets. As you know, or most of you should know, so in 1980 the first norm for public service broadcasters was approved. So ever since then there has been no other new standard regulating public service broadcasters, not until 2006. That was followed by a law in 2007. And last year, there was a report of this law for public service broadcasters. This law that provided for tender process and also for decisions to be made at the level of the board of directors to ensure independence and to ensure pluralism in public service broadcasters. And we are finding ourselves in a situation of lack of fulfillment on the part of the parliaments. They are not fulfilling with the obligations or duties that set out for themselves in that legislation, but we are finding ourselves in a situation of an actual block when it comes to choice or election or nomination of the members of the board of directors. So in Spain, we've been seeing a reality which is much more concerned than the reality that was detected in 2016, lack of independence, political control of existing powers over broadcasters, not only public service broadcasters at national level, but also in the different autonomous communities in Spain, and especially regarding the issue of independence in Catalonia. Evidence, a clear problem, a clear risk with regard to independence of media, and also the model of media, where media should overweight or offset the work carried out by public service broadcasters. So, market pluralism, as we can see in the reports, has been rated as of medium risk, and same as social inclusion. And then regarding basic protection, in Spain we are also at a middle level of risk. So in the next slides, we see that regarding protection of right of to information, protection of journalism profession, the risk is moderate, and in this case the effective protection of audiovisual authority is what is most worrying. In Spain, since 2013, according to the law that was passed we formally have an audiovisual authority, and ends up being questioned in terms of the enforcement or in terms of its activities. And as I said before, this situation, a situation of market pluralism and concentration of ownership, places us in this situation, in this level of risk, medium level of risk. And from there, we can see that despite the formal efforts made through legislation, I'd like to focus on the high risk of cross-media ownership of media, and therefore not only from the perspective of effective pluralism in media, but also from the exercise of competition. So now regarding social inclusion, so media literacy, access to media, we see medium levels of risk as an aspect that should be paid attention to. And to finish, I'd like to say that this report, as a result of it, a number of legal amendments have been made by current governments and the previous legislature regarding the penal code measures that could even put at a higher risk the effective exercise of right of information, of freedom of expression. I'm referring to the gag law. So media are strongly questioned in Spain. So therefore, this also leads to strong, big challenges, also resulting from the economic crisis. So it seems that the media system has not yet recovered. So Media Pluralism Monitor is at your disposal, both full reports and a summarized version of it, available at the addresses that show on the screen, and I'm also at your disposal for any questions that you may have. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. We start now with our first discussion, and it will be moderated by Yolanda from PDLI. Where are you? Yolanda? There she comes. And so I asked all the speakers from the first session on the stage. Unfortunately, Anna and Banu Güven are sick today. Banu Güven couldn't travel here, Anna couldn't make it here. We will hear a short statement by Banu Güven. She sent to us tonight later, and I give the microphone then to Yolanda now.
Muchas gracias, Nora. Aprovecho un segundo para decir que ha sido un placer colaborar durante.
Let me thank you very much, Nora. Thank you very much. I think it's been I must take this moment to thank their organisations for having participated in the organisations. We've worked through great collaboration and very fruitfully, and I want to thank all of Nora's team, the Press and Media Freedom Centre, and all the other organisations that have been working, and of course to all of the speakers who've agreed to come and join us. As you can see in the programme, the title is about innovations and challenges. We've looked at the negative side of the coin so far, about the level of concentration of media ownership in Europe, in the traditional media and the multimedia groups. However, the reality of the media is such that it has been changing over recent decades. the large multimedia groups shown in the snapshot we saw before are not the kinds of players who ensure the information access for citizens. There are different. There are not only different models for journalists and different platforms, but also the technology are allowing new ways of information to be tracked and for ownership of the media to be tracked as well. So unfortunately in Europe and in Spain we don't always have access or clear access to transparency about media ownership, but we have new tools that are, despite these difficulties and these strict regulations, which need to be changed of course, and what we're driving for changes for this to come about in Spain in order to ensure we have access to know who's behind the media. But despite this, there are innovations and new tools that are enabling us to challenge and to dig into this information in the reality that we have. So looking to the future, so we need to move on from the traditional snapshot of traditional media and think about the new business models that are improving and extending the panorama and the new formats that are also emerging. So we've got originally a program of 5 speakers. Regrettably 2 of them have been unable to attend. Anna Ormaechea, the founder of Cuonda, one of the journalistic startups networks, has flew, and Banu Güven has also been unable to come from Turkey to explain about the situation. Fortunately, Banu has been able to send us a statement which we'll read to you at the end of this session. So let me introduce to you the speakers on these topics. We've got Juan Luis Sánchez. He's a member of the council of the PDLI, and someone who's been following all the activities of the PDLI and working hard since our foundation. He's also the editor-in-chief and co-founder of eldiario.es, not only for Spain but also the whole of Europe, and quite successfully also in The Guardian. He'll be talking to us about the success of eldiario.es and other ways of funding digital journalism, which is breaking the traditional oligopolies in press. Also got Mar Cabra, who's a recent Pulitzer Prize winner, and she is on a sabbatical at the moment, but still forms part of the network of the ICIJ, the International Consortium. And we also want to introduce you Anna, the ingovernable hacker from she was in the hackers meeting in 2017 and has been able to facilitate the tracking of the owners of all companies, and in our case particularly with regard to media companies. Good morning. Thank you all very much for joining us. And thank you to the organisers too for helping to create this event. At the end of the day, when we talk about media concentration, at the end of the day we're talking about the lack of freedom of information. When people accumulate a lot of power, this inevitably ends up having consequences for the quality of democracy and the quality of the information. There's a story from a few years ago from a journalist friend of mine who said that his editor, quite politely, his editor at him, "Be careful what you tweet, because yesterday you tweeted that you didn't like a particular film." And the journalist was a journalist that didn't report normally on cinemas. Well, yeah, that's when I left the cinema. I tweeted, but don't forget that the producer of that film is the owner of this media, of this newspaper. So you need to be careful. This is just an anecdote, but perhaps it's a way of reflecting how our freedom may come into conflict of interest, and it all ends up in the same bag when it comes to ownership. Similarly, we've got projects that have emerged from those great structures that are not part of the large media groups. And what the internet has allowed us to have, with problems of course, but what internet has enabled us to do is to have the ability to set up our own channels, our own media, without depending on structures. We don't need the huge investments required for radio and TV broadcasting. We don't need a factory or a plant, a print plant, to produce thousands and thousands of paper copies. We can do things over the internet much more quickly, much more cheaply, and that's not just a matter that has impact on the freedom of the businesses, but also on the freedom of information. Small groups of journalists and doing the same thing as lawyers and architects have done. They're setting up their own offices and being able to do what they do best without having to obey to what the developers are saying, or the magnate is saying, or the owner of the business is saying. So this is a case of where people have seen the opportunity to change the philosophy on which the media operate. The idea is not just of impact and quality, but now a business that's not just involving dealing with other people, but becoming engaged with other people. In Facebook and Google, we see that they're all competing with the number of visitors in order to be able to serve ads to those visitors. If we try to compete with them, then the bigger fish are going to win, because entertainment and entertaining people is always going to attract much more attention than any kind of information or fact-based journalism. So if we want to compete and want to base on attracting people's attention, so we no longer have a monopoly of people's attention, because we no longer control the media in which the information is published, that's a losing battle. But at the same time, we're trying to find new model that moves from keeping people's attention to engaging with them and encouraging them to stay with us. In recent years, we've seen how the situation that has arisen is going far beyond pay to read, where the payment is always an option, but if we pay attention to the trend that we see in El Diario or in The Guardian, or the New York Times, etc., with a very complex pay-to-read model, what we're getting is a level of engagement between the journalist and the reader. It's not a relationship based on, I know something and that you don't know, and if you give me money, I'll let you in on the secret. No. This is not a client-supplier relationship. This is not a commercial relationship. It's a relationship as a partner in the media. At the end of the day, the relationship is based on journalism is necessary. If you don't pay for journalism, then journalists will have to resort to other sources, and that's going to be a problem, so please come and help. And journalism has always been a profession, a very proud profession. We like to be strong and rough, and we're propping up the bar and standing strong against all comers. And yet, we have to learn to show our vulnerabilities, expose that vulnerability of the situation we are in many times, and to acknowledge that we need the engagement of our readers and society in general. And we have to do that even though we make mistakes, because we're not strong enough to be able to demand freedom of expression. We have to get that assistance, that help. International prestige is not enough. If we can convince people to join with us in that call for public service information rather than buying our product, then I think we'll be able to have a future for small media in order to ensure this engagement that will strengthen the independence of the media and add additional oxygen to the media in general, not just in Spain, but elsewhere. I don't know if that was 5 minutes, but that's all I have to say. Thank you, Cuonda. In the discussion later, we'll talk about the negative aspects of the internet, because this is a bipolar world, and there may be new opportunity for journalism in the internet, but there are other new monopolies that are appearing on the internet that are affecting us too. And these are the great technological platforms such as Google and Facebook that have changed their relationship with the media, and this is a great risk as well in terms of freedom of information and the media concentration. So now Mark Cabra is going to continue talking about journalism, non-for-profit journalism, and other innovations that are extending the situation in Europe and around the world. For the last 7 years, I've worked on the International Consortium for Investigative Journalists, ICIJ. And first of all, I needed to explain what this is. I hope you're all familiar with the ICIJ. It's a channel that started in the US. I'm sure you'll have heard of it when you heard about the Panama Papers. But how can an organization like this be financed? And one of the questions that I always get when I speak about our work, oh, the Panama Papers, how did you manage to fund that? It's really very interesting, because as a Spaniard, it was a shock to come across this model, which is very frequent in the US. There's a foundation, a not-for-profit organization, which have a 501c3 tax status, which means that donors receive tax credits for the amounts they donate. And with those donations, they're able to fund the newspaper. So, as you can agree, there's a great level of engagement with those readers who think that the media should exist, because they are the ones funding our work, so they want us to continue. But a large part of the funding from the consortium comes from credits from large foundations. And the good thing about working for a foundation that does journalism and investigative journalism is that the foundations are required to be totally transparent. All foundations have to complete a form, the 990 form, the 990 form in the US, which is a public document. It's available on the internet, both within the body that receives this Form 90, and there are 990 search engines as well, if you want to, from Oxfam all the way to the ICIJ consortium. And you get detailed information as to where the $3 million or so that the consortium received for its budget during 2017. You can see the information about the consortium, and you can also see the other information about the Pulitzer's publishers. There are different centers in the US that are not-for-profit foundations that are doing investigative journalism at a local level. And all of them are under the umbrella of the Institute for Non-Profit News, the INPN. So if you're interested, this is another ecosystem that should be explored in the US. I recommend that you explore the Institute for Non-Profit News. So, if this consortium is due to 2 or 3, 4 large foundations as its main donors, such as the Open Society Foundation, OSF, or George Soros, oh, you're all in Soros' pocket. No, I've never met him. And that regardless of Soros or the OSF, it's the philanthropic arm of George Soros as a magnet. There are always Chinese walls between where the money comes from and how the journalism is written. So I've never worked in the world of commerce, and I've worked here in Spain in journalism. And I've been told, I don't like that video, you need to change this. And when you film that, show that politicians try to cut out the booing at the meeting. I've never found that at the ICIJ. In the 7 years that I've been working for the consortium, we've looked about the HSCB, different banks around the world, large corporations, multimillionaires, and we've never been afraid of anything because of the independence that you have of having these Chinese walls between the journalists and the donors. And this is very interesting. This is something that can extend. It's more difficult to have this model in Europe for different reasons. In particular, because the tax deduction system's available. You give some money, if you make a donation, you receive a donation. This is worse than a tax exemption. And also there is less culture of donating in Spain. We tend to donate to development NGOs and the like, or the Red Cross, Oxfam, Save the Children, and so on. But for someone to investigate corruption, this is not something that people donate to. There are models that are beginning to emerge which carry out investigative journalism, and they also apply the same model. But in Europe, in Germany, there's a very interesting case of Corrective, which is a not-for-profit organization that carries out investigative journalism, and in the UK, there's the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, which does the same thing in the UK, but it was very, very difficult for them to be able to get the category of charitable status. The situation where the NGO enables its donors to receive tax benefits as a result. In the UK, they couldn't understand that journalists should be a charity. In the same way as you could then donate to the church or to an NGO, you could also donate to journalists. Now they're working on the local bureau for investigation, and they're trying to re-inject local level journalism and data investigation, data research into local media that don't have their own resources to do so. So this is something, and of course we'll talk about Google and the technological giants. I don't want to get sidetracked on that now, but the idea is that we're being creative, apart from the commercial model. And what does this mean for the subject of media ownership? Well, I think that it redefines ownership to some extent. If you've got a local bureau, what's a local bureau? What does that mean for finance? Is there any influence? What does it mean when the OSF is funding such media or this type of journalism, and the ICIJ and other institutions in Latin America? What does all that mean? Well, I can tell you from my experience, I haven't had any contact with donors as a journalist. It all came out when the Panama Papers were published. We published them, and the tax havens and so on. And the question is, how can we do what we did before, but be more creative about it? For example, how can we continue to do international investigative journalism without paying for our trips? So the students, they travel like students and pay very little. Because I don't recommend going down that road, because journalists need to be paid for their work, otherwise it affects their dependence. And the alternative is the collaborative model. So what the consortium does is organize groups of journalists. And in the Paradise Papers and in the Panama Papers, we've got groups of almost 400 journalists, and they all work for over 100 different media outlets. And what does this mean? This is wonderful, because it gives you local experience in every country, and also it gives you local exposure in every country. And thirdly, it gives you a huge group of people who are critical of the system, but also critical of everybody else as well. So this is important for media ownership, because obviously in the tax havens revelations in the Paradise Papers and the Panama Papers, It's important to consider these aspects. Of course, it wasn't completely transparent. Who owns these companies in tax havens? That's far from transparent. But someone turned out to be a media owner. If that had been only one person, nothing could have been done about it. But if you don't publish it, since the one in this country doesn't publish it will be published in another country. So this is what gives these journalists the means to avoid their own censorship. And even for internal negotiations, the media outlet owners were forced to publish information to their own detriment, some more quickly than others required some more pressure, because if they didn't publish it, somebody else was going to publish it on the other side of the world, and they'd be outed for not publishing in the first place. So I think this type of publication is extremely important, and is occurring more and more often now. So what does this mean? Who are the allies? How does this affect the investigation? I think it's something that we're going to be seeing in the years ahead. Thank you very much, Mar. And now I'll give the floor to Anna, who's got her presentation ready. Who's got this new hacker's tool for tracking ownership. Well, you've presented me as a hacker, but I'm not the traditional hackers, because really technology is not my strong point. So what we try to do is produce a tool that facilitates investigative journalism. I could extend it into media, but it's not just that. But we can investigate all kinds of ownerships of companies. Since we've got lots of procurement contracts and public contracting, and there are tools that tell you when these things are announced in the public channels, well, there are other tools that link the projects to the people who benefit from the contract awarded. The name is symbolic. Chaos's origin is source, and 155 has got nothing to do with the Spanish Constitution, but rather a tool that has to do with the 15th of May. The 155 was the beginning of a public movement in Spain. So it's important for us not to see the institutions, to see ourselves not as an institution with lots of resources. No, we go from hand to mouth to some extent, but it's important to understand everything that's happened with these systems since the last few years in Spanish society. So we're always using public data, and the problem that we had, as I said, that our institution works from hand to mouth, and we don't have a lot of resources. So we needed to access public data only. So our investigation, quite in depth, of procurement contracts at local and regional level, and these are available in the company's register. So when you want to see what's happening, or companies get all their money without being clear about who are the specific individuals who are benefiting from those contracts. Not the companies themselves, they're abstract companies, but there are people behind them, and those are the people who will be engaging in these huge corporate structures where we all get lost when we start engaging in investigation. So using these public data sources, what we were able to do was devise a search engine to analyze the public gazette in Spain, the BOE, and to use a search engine like Google, for instance, because there are lots of engines that analyze the advertising from the announcements from the public sector, but they give so much detail, so much information of such a wide range. They have to go to many different levels that people get lost in this excess of information. We're unable to structure it correctly. So for us, the important thing, or on the basis of the investigation we're carrying out, we realized that the main factor was to know who was the company behind it all. Because behind that company, we could find lots of data, and you could include the name of the company here, and then you get the number of contracts that company has received, divided by year. So you could be getting lots of details. We're improving, obviously. This is still the beta system. It's permanently in beta system because we're always trying to improve it to reach our goals. But it will give you an amount of information that will help you to know and verify when the contracts are awarded to the lowest bidder. Then you can see which criteria have been used and how the low bidder actually got a lot more money than they originally bid. So theoretically, you win the public tender because you offered the lowest price, but at the end of the day, the amount of the surplus costs is huge. And this is an indicator that there may have been some corruption in the award. We're not judges, we can't declare that something is or isn't corruption, but what we can show is that there have been economic transactions, and perhaps our judge should be looking into them. And as journalists, we're investigating through many, many hours of effort. And investigation tends to be very expensive in terms of money and in terms of hours. So, having done this, spent a lot of time devoting to this tools with our limited resources, we've been able to identify the original document, so that everything that you're stating is supported by a public data source. And the fact that the data source is public is wonderful, because really you can't argue about it. It's the legislation is obliging these institutions to implement more transparency. I'm going through this very quickly, of course, because we have very little time. But the next step is, what have we done that makes us different from other tools? Well, we've taken all those procurement contracts, and what we've done is cross-tab the data with the business register. The business register tells us the companies and the names of the people participating in those companies with their different relationships. So if I have a company, I can see the directors of that company, and I see the relationships that those directors have with other companies, and so on ad infinitum. So I can go, if you're in investigative journalism, you'll all be aware that there's such a tangle of relationships that you could take you years to identify all these links, but by clicking on this website, you're able to resolve the issue quickly. So I've typed in one company. It could be any company from the communications industry, from the construction industry. It doesn't matter. It's just showing you how it works. You type in the name of a company, it identifies the company. This is the beta version, as I said, and the next version will be linking it to the number of procurement contracts that's been received. If it's got an application in the Madrid Regional Council Gazette and the BOCAM, or in the State Gazette, the BOE, then it will appear. And how many publications have been received through the different systems. And it starts deploying all the corporate relationships that exist. But this is something that explodes exponentially. When you start investigating it, you can easily get lost. So with the preliminary investigation, you know what it is you're looking for. The wonder of this tool is that you have a little button where it says clean up, and you, even assuming you had been able to understand all these corporate ties, but by pressing the cleanup button, you can identify, you tell it to clean up, and if there is a direct relationship between all those companies that were fed into the system, then it reduces it down to 10 companies. So now, any financial police force, any investigator doesn't have to go asking round and about as to what are the links and economic transactions of these hundreds of thousands of companies that appear in all corporate conglomerates through the company engineering, as they call it, the corporate engineering. But with this tool, you have a practically clear route of where has the money gone. We've been asked to present this on the website, but so far we can say that we've cleaned up all through the direct routes. I'd rather let the judges decide whether this is a corruption network or not, but what we do provide is at a simple screenshot, you can see lots of direct routes where money has gone through, where there may be tax avoidance issues or potential corruption in public procurement contracts and so on. So if someone has been engaged in a crime, then you can know about it. And nowadays we've got people who are participating in over 100 corruption scandals. These people should be disqualified from further participation. So by improving this system, we hope to make it more international so that it works in other countries too, because it will give us lots of clues, because many of the things that appear in these countries belong to other countries, and the investigation could go elsewhere and extend into tax havens around the globe. So for an investigator, it's a tool that saves a lot of work, and for financial police and for the institutions as well, we are also able to tag the companies that have appeared in a scandal, whatever it had to do with. They can be located and identified. So if you were to sign a new procurement contract, you could put the company into our search engine and you'd get all the details of what they were involved in the past. So we think it's a very useful tool for any institution or financial policing body and others. It's not the solution, of course, but it's a tool for real transparency for future institutions.
All right, we have time until 12:30, where we will break for coffee. So now I'd like to give the floor back to Mar, because, she would like to say something regarding Anna's, Mara's presentation. Okay, Anna's presentation. So thank you very much for your presentation. That's a highly interesting tool. So about, public information, some of the problems that we have when we investigate corporations, sometimes we see that mercantile or commercial registries are falling short because we know nothing about the final beneficiaries. This will change in the next few years, and then in December the new terms and conditions for the new European directive for AML was approved. It will be transposed in different member states in the next 18 months. And one of the provisions is about registering beneficiaries in an open or public registry. So regarding trusts, only that the information will be available only to financial authorities, taxation authorities, and law enforcement authorities. That was, this very last point was strongly criticized, as it continues to be like a way out. But anyway, this will be very interesting, because oftentimes you only know about the name of the administrator, the director, but you don't know who are the shareholders and not in the list the beneficiaries. So when you investigate all that, you find out. But this is wonderful. This is, I'm in love with this tool, because it is convenient, it is highly practical today, because now we are at a position, okay, we are skilled to have, we can have well-directed routes of activities so that the financial police can ask for more information. So we are working a lot, and then we are seeing that sometimes technology is overtaking them, so they have started to open up to set up companies to take out their money. But we have spotted that company, we have tracked those companies because we are receiving alarms and notifications every single day, and we publish that. So therefore we are preventing them from taking out the money so money will be concentrated, will be blocked. They will not be able to take it out. So we are blocking the money because we are anticipating and saying the money will go through these routes, through these other routes. They will feel observed and tracked, and they will not be able to do anything about it. And also this is a very important tool for prevention of money fleeing. And also the history, well, in my computer, same as in many other places where I have stored this information. So the history, we have a long history since 2009 when these data were made open, available. So now we can understand what happened with all that. Well, the route that the money has followed. So they are mapped. It is not a question of saying, I believe. No, this is based on facts. This is based on data. So interpretation is to be made by the financial police. So the only thing that we are saying is saying these are direct routes, and then it is up to the financial police to make the interpretation, to take into account all the sources of information or the data. Thank you very much. Now we have time until 12:30 for more questions, for more comments or reflections. Okay, so there is a question over there. Hello. I'd like to highlight something that Angel mentioned. So he said that according to the study, it says that the risk of independence of public services broadcasters in Spain is a high risk. So my name is Agustin Llaner, Secretary General of the Federation of Trade Union of Journalists. So he talks about the situation of block regarding the new law. So it is necessary for everyone to understand the situation is a Kafkian situation. The Parliament approved on 29th of September an amendment of the Spanish radio and TV for it to be democratic and independent from the government. That law establishes that 3 months are given to develop a regulation and to make a public tendering awarding, and because they did not take into account the draft proposals by other political parties, the government, the party in government said that no, there is no more time, and that they just want to they want to continue with the existing models for New Year. So we are asking them to produce a regulation, even if this is out of term, so that the president or the chairman of the board of directors should be chosen, should be appointed. So I'd like to highlight that has also been spotted in the report shared by us by Angel Garcia Castillejo. We have to do something so that the situation does not continue in the same fashion for the next 4 years. Hello, my name is Josemi from the Union of Free Radios and Community Radios in Madrid. I have a question regarding the report. So, well, this roundtable has been highly interesting, but I have a question about the reports. In one of the last charts, there was also scoring about access to media, community media. So the score apparently was not very high, or the risk was not very high. So I'm surprised because the development and access to this type of media is at risk because there is lack of legal requirements or legal regulations. So now we are facing cases, for instance, in La Coruña, where a community radio with Quack FM has been there for 30 years. Now it is facing a sanction file and is threatened to pay a fine of 200,000 euros. So according to 2010 law, we may be protected by it. But in Navarra, shortly ago, they were about to give a license to a community radio, and out of the sudden, then the license was not awarded anymore, was blocked. So we don't know what happens, but perhaps perhaps not enough research has been done about community media because, well, according to the report, the level of risk is a low one. So the person is speaking with no mic, so sorry, we cannot interpret. Okay, Ricardo Gomez. I come from the Trade Union of Journalism in Catalonia. So you told us about a transparency law. A law on transparency that also requires it to be transposed to the various member countries. Well, transposition is our main barrier. All the European recommendations, before they are adopted by governments, it's very, very challenging. And then transposition is always full of loopholes, and for whatever reason, for some reason, the regulation is not transposed. Also, I am a shareholder of Critica. So when I said shareholder, I mean that I invested 1,000 euros. One of the problems that we have is that even those who want to change things, or people from the platform, are not aware about the need to support journalists, alternative journalism initiatives. So that is to say, the councils, local councils who have money, even if they don't know, they have lots of power to promote journalism amongst citizens and community media. So they can generate and set up new community media. They can do it. Councils can do it. So we should try and work on that with councils to favor setup of creation of community media, because I believe that small media are in a position to make a revolution, and then the big ones will die when they are due to die. Hello, good morning. Thank you very much to the organizers for organizing this meeting. I believe it will not be long enough to discuss all this issue. Félix Iglesias from Comisiones Obreras, a trade union, and I'm also a journalist. I'd like to ask a number of questions to Juan Luis. Juan Luis, when you said that we don't need big investments, yes, you're right. If we eliminate or remove many of the intermediaries in the alternative media, but does it make it feasible for journalists to make a living out of those new media? Because there is lots of job precarity and not good working conditions. So we cannot really ask for independence when the actual workers cannot really be independent, okay, cannot really make a living out of it. Then you also talked about engagement. Can we translate that into, I don't know, working on demand of our subscribers, readership? How can we avoid that? Because now we are also engaged with traditional media, with the big advertising channels. Engagement is okay, it's okay, but may also limit limit our job, our work. And then regarding the formula of the foundations, what you told us, it would be very, very interesting to have, it would be wonderful to have these laws here in Spain. And, well, what about, well, in the US, the foundations are non-profit. So what happens at the end of the day? What do you do? Do you work in a... So we cannot really leave journalism to in the hands of donations or goodwill. So we just don't want to be victims, or just don't want to be kidnapped by large corporations, large public institutions. And these are my questions. So there is... Okay, last word, okay? Okay, last question, only if it is very brief. Okay, 30 seconds, okay, you may split that, okay, 30 seconds each. Okay, Alfonso Armada from Reporters Without Borders. Two things. Juan Luis, I'm surprised that you supporting engagement instead of attention. So it is really, really sad that media outlet is saying that we have lost the battle of attention. When that happens, we are lost or finished as journalists. And Anna, presentation of you two, wonderful. I was looking for the name of artist who apparently took his life. Someone said that he was kidnapped, and he did like graphical representation that were exhibited at MoMA. A wonderful mix between politics and arts. Very, very interesting. Thank you very much for your brevity. Pablo Romero. So, regarding or drawing on what Alfonso said, what happens? We have less and less time. We are more and more splitting our attention between social media and big players. So big players, big social media are kind of dominating or attracting most of the attention. What happens with journalists now, and what is happening with the drift that we are seeing in terms of the danger of neutrality of the social media? How will that impact us by the time the social media will no longer be neutral? Okay, what happens when that neutrality in social media will no longer be there? What will be the impact for us? Thank you very much for all your questions. So now we give the floor to our panelists. Okay. Hello. Very briefly, regarding what Agustin said and the trade union of journalists. So in Spain, we are facing a real risk, an actual risk in terms of independence, viability, sustainability of public service broadcasters, radio and TV, to the point that we are not only feeling and perceiving that lack of neutrality in the media, but it also we are seeing more and more than governments. And in the case of the Spanish Parliament, and well, also the regional parliament, we are not seeing any clear commitment, not only with the compliance of the laws that they have enacted, that they have approved and they have passed. They are our representatives and they are policy makers. That's their duty, that's their responsibility. So this situation is a paradox. We are seeing parliaments passing laws that do not comply with, as it's been the case. They have developed regulations and norms for the appointment of the board of directors of Spanish radio and TV, and they did not fulfill with those regulations. And then drawing on the question about community media, we also see governments over and over again not fulfilling with laws and regulations. For instance, for the development of compliance with an article for the general law on audiovisual media. So this law continues not to be applied. So this is denying to the audiovisual media access to the electrical spectrum. So we are finding ourselves in a situation where we are facing a huge barrier, a huge challenge difficult to overcome because the High Court has just supported that decision, so therefore AV media cannot access the radioelectric spectrum. In the report that I shared with you, this situation is being included. Lack of regulation preventing access from community media to this radioelectric spectrum. And probably, well, the mistake comes from the fact that the level of risk is considered to be medium regarding the access of minorities to the access of media in Spain in general, but not access to community media. So therefore, I would kindly invite you to fully read the report, and one of the aspects that is being highlighted as high risk is that of situation of community media in Spain. All right, so for big topics to answer to. So attention versus engagement. So I have 30 seconds for each. So when I talked about attention-driven versus engagement-driven, well, I could not qualify that well enough. Well, precariousness, yes, I also took part in projects about precariousness. That is our biggest enemy. I'm really, really angry at seeing very many friends setting up media without knowing how they would pay for their salaries and the salaries of those working for them. That's one of the main and foremost problems or errors that we make when we set up small media. So 10 years later, after the first wave of new digital media, we continue to have the same problems. We continue to set up video projects without being aware of the technological side of it, okay, and how to make money. So in our case, we've been lucky enough. Since day one, we've been raising our salaries. We've been profitable since first moment, but this is not a lesson from anyone. So we all have different hows and where and whys, and as I said, there are many examples of precarious journalism or precarious media outlets having a negative impact on quality of information. Thus, intermediation in journalism is positive because it makes us freer, and then also faces challenges, for instance, finding new formula to tell things. And saying this in one statement is very difficult. So I have no problems in having robots making journalism as long as we are able to be programmers of those robots and to give them some things that we need them to do for us so that we can focus on real, actual journalism. So regarding attention on attracting readership, this is a risk. Any business model, any income model brings about a number of problems or has a number of inherent problems. One of the problems based on the engagement-driven model is like a Snow White, okay? If you don't tell your reader that how beautiful he or she is, that generates tension. I could spend an hour telling you how we handle that tension. So we handle that tension through us being freer and freer. So I prefer the pressure from the readership than the pressure from the advertisers. While pressure from readership is much more pure, much more treatable. So the pressure from someone who attacks you because you are not saying what they want to hear, rather than having a strong machinery who is kind of stamping on you. Okay, so regarding attention-driven business. So because I didn't have time, I did not qualify that. I'm not against attention, but I'm against having business synonym to business. So our world is free, it's Creative Commons. We have gave up to making some money because we just want our content to reach as far as possible. Attention is impact. Attention is the only way that helps us change things. Yes to attention, but no to your sustainability, depending on who shouts louder. because in the past we decided what was broadcast or printed or not, but now we don't decide that anymore. Google or Facebook decides that for us. So competing with Facebook or Google to see who spends more time on the website, them or their website or mine, that's a battle which is lost. Well, some people compare our digital profession with Netflix or Spotify and say, well, in Netflix people pay, why shouldn't they pay for a piece of news? Well, same as you pay to view a film. No. That takes us to compete for attention. So news is not a product, a media outlet, its identity and its role in society is the closest to a product, and engagements and complicity with readership is the only thing that could keep that role alive. And of course, to get really far away, to reach out really far, and so that everyone reads out. Okay, we need attention, but we just don't want to monetize attention and only attention, because if we do that, the battle is lost. And then network. So we are more and more in the hands of large corporations, big players that will make decisions driven by economic and political interests. What can be and cannot be published, who's got fast or slow access to this and that, who has its anonymity guaranteed or not. That's another battle ahead of us. And then talking about attention and making this the change of algorithm of Facebook, to me, professionally speaking, to date, as a person who does this kind of thing in my company and my media outlet, to me that's a problem. We have to see how to fix that. Well, if I were not a journalist, if I were outside all that, perhaps it would not be as bad. That change of algorithm would not be as bad, because we would stop being obsessed with what Facebook does to reach out readers. So we just don't want to compete with Facebook through memes or video of cats. Okay. All right, that's all from me. Okay, I cannot say more in this time. All right. So I'd like to explain something about the way foundations work. So having a non-profit model does not mean that those of us who work for the foundation are not getting any money. I've never said that we are volunteers working for a foundation, not at all. So the International Consortium for Investigation Journalism in 2017 had a budget of $3 million, and that budget was largely used up for salaries. So there are 20 people working in the foundation, and this is exactly the same for other foundations. CVO, which is a Spanish example, that foundation pays the workers. So non-profit model, it does not mean that we are volunteers and that we don't get any money. That means that those who give us money have tax reduction. They enjoy a tax rebate. So here we may have, I don't know, just individuals, particulars, who want to do that, or large magnates and say, well, I have lots of money, okay, let us do something beneficial for the world, same as Bill Gates does through his foundation. So this is what non-profit model means. And what I said about collaboration, I said that if we collaborate and if we bring effort and forces together, we will reach out further. So Panama Papers, the consortium, throughout 2015 and 2016, so we worked for a whole year. So the budget that we had that year was $2 million. So we can say that the Panama paper costed $2 million to the consortium, because then Guardian had 5 journalists hired or employed in that for a whole year. So Confidential, La Sexta, TV channel. So we could say that Panama paper costed 200 million euros, but this is shared economy. So we are kind of like the Airbnb of journalism. So you pay for your expenses, and then all together we raised 200 million euros. Okay, we'll pay our share for that. And 2 nuances. I was not talking about a law on transparency, a directive about anti-money laundering. which has a number of provisions on transparency. So the thing about beneficiaries should be transposed as such, okay? Let us see if nothing is lost along the way. So we will meet each other in 18 months. And then in terms of neutrality of internet, I think it says. So also very interesting to discuss algorithms. So nowadays we're talking about importance or key importance of transparency, who's behind media. So we will speak more and more about transparency of algorithms. We should look more and more into algorithms, how they work, impact of them, how people taking or receive news of innovation, and the bubbles that are generated around people. That's very dangerous. So in Go Center in Colombia is carrying out very interesting research about that. I will highly recommend you to visit the website and to download some of this interesting research. Okay, so Anna. So she's not speaking, the mic is not on, so we cannot hear. So there is, mic is not on. I wish sometime I can make a living, better living that I can have now. So our objective was to show up to evidence all that. Is this a benefit for society? Yes, it is a tool. It is a tool that, so I just get to see public data and then we cross them, and then I said, well, and that's what we do. So we produce a tool for that. Sometimes limitations come from the fact that, well, the perspective of the money, profitability, a number of things, and we tend to overlook that there are other things in the long term can end up being profitable, because you are delivering to society a way to stop tax evasion, recovering money that has been taken away from us, and ensuring that that will not happen again, because they are fully controlled since minute one when they set up a company. So the possibilities, okay, opportunities offered by this tool, I don't know whether you can visualize that. So it's a tool that should be everywhere in every single institution. So you enter the name of the company, you get to see the full history of the company, then you see the roots, then you neutralize those stakeholders, those involved in it. So what else do you want? I think this is an incredible start. All right, thank you very much. Because the conclusion, I'd like to say that this roundtable just wanted to show the bipolar moment where we are. Technology offers us new opportunities. At the same time, we have legacy issues, old issues that have been emphasized by the Federation of Trade Union of Journalism. This is one of the founders of PDLI. So we have a challenge. The challenge in Spain is to have an independent radio and TV. We will continue to advocate for that, and we will also, well, we'll make everything possible for the fulfillment of the general law on audiovisual media. So thank you very much, Agustin, for your collaboration, and since PDLI, we will continue to fight really hard so that that law is eventually fulfilled. So thank you very much. We're ready for coffee now.